warmly welcome you to this interview in the series that is all about unleashing the audacious woman within. Today we have with us Sally Griffyn, aka the Millionaire Yogi. Sally has shapeshifted many times throughout her career. She has run a successful property development company in the UK. She has written several books, a new one of which is about to come out. She's a high priestess of Wicca, and the list goes on and on. She is a true visionary and a truly audacious woman. Welcome, Sally, and thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure. Lovely to be here.
So for those in our audience that haven't had the pleasure of meeting you yet, would you tell us a little bit about how you came to be doing the work that you do?
Whoa, what a question. Yes, I think the work that I do embodies everything that I am, the threads of the soul journey that I'm on, and the teachings that I really feel need to be out there.
Yeah.
So, you know, on the one hand, I've had an immense spiritual path, which has gone on and on and on, and is ongoing, and actually is the guiding light right now more than anything. I've stepped into a legacy phase for the rest of my life, and that means that I will be reverting much more to the spiritual teachings, and that's where my work is headed. Yeah. Ironically, I'm also a branding specialist, so the spiritual is right behind looking at this, the symbols that people may choose, or I work with them to find their brand. But it's all the spiritual work. And then I'm an events creator. I've done that for years, and I've gone back into it because I feel that this is such a potent time for us to be digitally connected. Yeah. And some people are really afraid of that, and I feel like really at ease with that. Yeah. So it's a long-term history of being a high priestess of Wicca. So that's my spiritual path. Yeah. And I train others to be priestesses or high priestesses, depending if they want to go that far with the training. And that's been nonstop for the last 28 years or so. And Wicca is it's connected to the oldest pathways of ancient, you know, spirituality in Britain and Ireland and Europe, really. And then Wicca is a slightly more modern term for it, but it really comes from wise, the idea of wise elders. And if you want to go even further back, it would be connected to the word witch. And I want to be really clear on that word has been derided, and that also comes from the word wise. Yeah. So it would be considered wise elders, and you know, all of the people who are connected with that, herbalists and people who could heal, and healers, herbalists, the whole range, midwives, all of that. So I've got I don't do so much of the herbal stuff, but I work directly with people's transformation, energetics, and I channel. Yeah. So that's my route in. Gosh, so, you know, there's so many pieces of
there's so many pieces in there that, you know, looking to the wiser and elder people in our community, and you talking about legacy building, all those things speak straight to my heart. And I feel that, you know, it's a massive piece that's missing, particularly in our Western culture. We can be dismissive of the older generation and the wisdom that they have to share. And I think that that beautiful learning that is once upon a time would have been passed from grandmother to mother to daughter and so on, now has been outsourced. We look to teachers and doctors and everybody else to be the experts, except that, you know, those close, beautiful, wise people in our lives. So I love that idea. I love that idea. it's so, I'm sure I had never heard the term before. We talked about it a little bit before we pressed record, but I would love you to talk a little bit more about that and, you know, what that entails or what that looks like. Why would somebody come to a Wicca high priestess?
Oh, okay. Well, there's a bit of a back history, and I think it's a really important one to understand what's happened with white culture, especially with in the face of Black Lives Matter right now. And this is a piece I want to offer into that space.
Yeah.
Because I'm so behind my brothers and sisters on that path, right? But look at me, I'm a super blonde white woman. And so the piece that is missing for many people, and why we have the words, these ridiculous words like woo-woo and, you know, like you're going into something weird or whatever, is because the history in Europe, and Australia was completely linked to that as well, were the witch hunts. And guess what the witch hunts were? The biggest genocide we've ever seen historically, ever. Not just like the Holocaust, you know, like way bigger than that. And it was systematic, and it was governed by white men, linked with war, linked with acquisition, and all through the church. And so at that time, when women were not educated, were not allowed to be educated, women as property, you can go back into so many threads of this. It's a massive conversation. We had a wave of, at the worst of it, imagine the Spanish Inquisition, who were legal torturers who used to come into your village, and they would just choose all those women, especially if they had any links to herbalism, healing, midwifery, you name it, and you would be literally, depending upon the area, hung, burned, tortured. So roll on. We have got, I mean, there were witch burnings up into 1700 and something or other, legally. You know, and we forget this because then we had good old science was brought in, and science was the one that got women to stop birthing by squatting and all of that, and men took over the right of women to birth in their own way. All the midwives have been removed, and the, you know, and it actually executed. Like, that's how scary it was. So you roll on, we get to this time in history. And I know that when I was a child, I had some pretty far out mystical experiences, and I had a grandmother. It was the daughter grandmother thing. My mum is not into any of this stuff at all. Deeply suspicious, and a doctor, and we managed that. But her mother was super spiritual, and I had this moment when I was a child, about 9 years old, and I lived with my grandmother. And I went to the bottom of the garden, and there was this vast sky in Yorkshire. I lived in the north of England. And I was looking up, and I had this really epic moment, which was, there's something way bigger than me, than this, you know, one of those realizations you have. And whatever the conversation I had with her, she came back with, there are people who are healers, and they're good people, and they're up on the North Yorkshire moors, and they dance naked in the wild, and they heal people with milk. And I thought, bring it on, at age 9. I had no idea what that was, but I was like, oh, wow, you know, different people. So my journey was to find the different people, and to distinguish these experiences that I would have, which was, yes, on the one hand, I had a very academic family. My dad's a scientist too, you know, he's an environmental scientist, but he's still a scientist with a big spiritual heart. My mother is an atheist and went, I'm not doing any of that. And then there was me, who was beyond the beyond. Highly academic as well at one point, but not interested in academia, which was just, you know, proving something up to a certain level, but then never goes beyond. And the beyond is the piece that I'm really interested in. That's the spiritual connection. So when I finally found a Wiccan couple, because they often work, Wicca is always representing male and female as divine. That was important for me because we've got rid of all the concept of divine feminine, and we've just done divine masculine for the last at least 2,000 years. And divine feminine is, you know, really in Wicca, the high priestess actually runs the group, runs the coven, is the head of it.
Yeah.
The divine masculine pushes her forward and is right behind her and right with her. But it's all about the feminine teaching and, you know, training women to go through these experiences that make them stronger on their own journey and path. And whatever your particular thing is, like, you know, each Wiccan will be, we look to nature as divine. Yeah. And so in nature, you see all the life seasons and cycles and everything. So it's a very cyclical spiritual path. It's not a religion, and it works with the sun and the moon. So cyclically, I'm always working with the full moon and the new moon all the time, every month. The word month comes from moon. Yeah. So when you start to really understand it, wise people, and we've got them in every culture. So Africa, India, you know, Siberia, and America has got it because of the slave runs that went through, you know, the slave trade. And they have got much of the mix of Wicca with African religion, which has still got the roots. So when the slaves got married, they would jump the broom. Wiccans jump the broom when we get married. So there's so many links, and, you know, it's a vast subject, but I felt compelled to be on that path. Yeah. And I'm just a medicine woman, really, if you want another description. Yeah. But I train people to be medicine people.
Yeah. I know that you talk a lot, and you support women in following that calling, and we can talk about that a little bit more. But I know, you know, just bringing in my journey to this, I did very poorly at school. I just could not grasp a lot of things, and certainly not maths and sciences. But I discovered naturopathy after leaving school, and once I found that and that calling to want to work with what Mother Nature provides to heal, I had no trouble in studying chemistry and biology and the sciences and the maths and so on. So I think that, you know, once you can relate it to something, it's one of my big bugbears with mainstream education, is that it's just so it really doesn't look at the individual child and what their calling is, and tapping into that. So when we perhaps going back, you were talking about the divine feminine, and I know that the year 2020 is this year of the divine feminine. So perhaps if we can look a bit more at that and what is currently going on across the globe right now in this period of transition, and how we look at the divine feminine energy and coming out the other side of this.
Yeah, well, there's a very distinct symbol, the lucky number 13, which used to be lucky. And it was lucky because when you have 13 moons, which we do this year, it's an unusual occurrence when you have, rather than a moon a month, full moon a month, which would be 12, you have 13. It's considered, that was always considered divine feminine because it was connected to the goddess number 13, and it was considered lucky. And then it's been denigrated by the church to make it unlucky. So you look at all these things, which are superstitions, and like black cats used to be lucky. They were all about tapping into the Egyptian connection, which is how we got a lot of the, you know, Bast as the goddess Bast. So then it's unlucky, right? You just watch for what's unlucky, except walking under a ladder. It's often literally what was considered lucky or connected to the feminine was derided and denigrated. And so we've got this lucky year of the symbols are up to show you that really we're in the divine feminine year. And that gives a very interesting thing about, well, we've got the symbols showing, then we've got unexpected events. And we know that we're entering the period of New Earth, which is the languaging of, let's say, the Aquarian age that we've been looking at for years, waiting for it to happen. And I thought it was in the 60s, because when I was born in the 60s, all the planets lined up in Aquarius. So I have 6 planets in Aquarius, because literally in the sky, there were 6 planets. And I have a friend who was born 2 weeks before, and he has 7. That was the harbinger of the age of Aquarius. And so I mistakenly thought that was when it happened. No, it's happening right now. That was just that was the symbols for it, if you like, astrologically. And what we've got now is we're in a period of time of birthing. We're getting rid of the old order. And the old order is the history of male white supremacy, actually. That would be a classification of it. Warmongers, people who use military to bring on power. It was a period of control, mass control, religion, where people were in something, but they had no individual right to express. It was a period of where women were property. I mean, literally, you were property. There was money passed over at your marriage. You were a bargain or not. You know, the history is insane that we walk in right now. And that we've got to a place where this birthing period, birthing by nature is got some tough sides to it. But we know also that we're birthing into a new earth. The new earth is taking some of the old ancient medicines and incredible ways of being, like, you know, just some simple terms like organic. It's got to be organic. We've got to respect animals. We've got to respect the earth. We have to respect women. We have to respect all people. We have to get off this, you know, white supremacy trip, which has been going on for a long time. And for those rulers to leave, it's going to be like the most ugly gasps of a dying order. And so you got to expect that some of it is not going to look pretty. Yeah. But the other side of it is, even with COVID, that we've had this cocooning stop to the way that we would have habitually behaved. We've just always done what we do. Yeah. We expect it to be the same. Then suddenly, boom. Yeah. And so I'll give you a couple of examples. I was talking to you about one. So people are in fear. I'm not at all afraid of this virus. We have endless viruses. We've had, since SARS, 1,200 viruses come through. Yeah. And they're always around you. And my question to a lot of people when they responded to COVID, I was like, well, when was the last time you had flu? Mm-hmm. And they were like, I can't even remember. Exactly. Yeah. Because this is only affecting not even 1% of the population, of the entire population on the planet. And so we are up against the fear of old order going down. And that's the fear mongering that comes in, like, let's control us. Let's get the vaccines. Let's get the chips, even all this absurdity, right? That's going on. Yeah. Facial recognition cameras. Let's follow everybody. You know, that's old order. Let's control it. Let's, you know, when in fact, it's one of the greatest symbols of, you know, a group of people, a group of souls leaving. Yes, that was the tough bit for some of us to witness, because it's en masse. Yeah. But the other side is, many of those people were in old age homes, not living a great life, not having a wonderful time. And so they have moved on, and there's a space now for us to consider what we really want to do. Yeah. And lots of the options that are going to come through. Just to give you an example, I talked to you about this as well, that in London during the lockdown, the mayor, who is pretty enlightened, and actually he's a Muslim enlightened man, you know, so an unusual leader has come forward, and he recognized the importance of bicycle tracks and all of that in London. So while we were in lockdown, they've all been put in place with no pain of the construction or anything like that. But London has actually fundamentally altered historically forever because of this man, because he's a brilliant visionary. And, you know, and it's going to reduce the pollution and all sorts of things that we've seen as a positive. You know, wildlife is coming back in London big time. Yeah. You know, seals in the Thames and all of that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, so many symbols of the divine feminine is all about nature, what works with nature, what works with the feminine. And so far, these control religions, governments, bodies have not worked with feminine intelligence at all. It's been derided, and now we're seeing it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really beautiful to look at the idea of this transition and looking at it, you know, being a birthing process, something new having to come out the other side of it. And as a mum of four, I understand birthing and the pain, but it, you know, the pain is so worth it. But it becomes a perspective thing, doesn't it? Rather than being really caught up in the fear of right now and the fear that is being bombarded if you tune into any kind of media and so forth at the moment. It's a very paralyzing place to live. So, you know, looking at some of the work you do, I love you talk about finding, is it the gold within?
Awakening your soul gold within.
Yeah. I remember hearing a beautiful story about a golden monk in Tibet that was uncovered. They covered it in clay during a war period. Do you know that story?
No.
They covered it in clay. They were being invaded, and then everybody was killed, and they didn't realize that this huge golden statue was actually gold underneath, because it just looked like mud or clay. And it was some hundreds of years later that they chipped away and revealed this beautiful golden Buddha underneath. But I love that story because it makes me think of, you know, like all the messaging that we accumulate through our lives, and the way all our shoulds, the way we should be, the way we should behave, or you know, the things that perhaps because we got through school and we got certain marks, we can do this job, or this is the only thing. You know, my career advisor told me I could be a hairdresser. That was his grand advice for me.
I love it. Well, you've got great.
Yeah, I mean, all to hairdressers, but it certainly wasn't my calling. But he wanted to stick me in that box because I was so appalling at school. Anyway, but I think, you know, I love to think of this time of cocooning and transition where, you know, we get to think outside the restrictions of ideas that we may have been holding on to and find that golden soul within. So, you know, what is that work that you do, and how do you start to reveal that gold within?
Well, it's a lot of the more spiritual work that I do. And so I am running a series of retreats, which will be live retreats. I don't want to do this work online yet, maybe. So, you know, now we've got the situation, so there'll be one in Bali, and then I'm going to do one in Glastonbury. But there's no regularity to it, because the whole concept of awakening your soul gold within is there will be steps of looking at what's a constriction for you. And so we do a 13-week process of it, and then there's a retreat right in the middle of it. So the thing that I would work on, I would do breath work with somebody and ask them to tune in very strongly into themselves. And then we start to look at where are constrictions, and you'll feel it. It's like, you know, often it's the back of the heart. The back of the heart is a place which is full of heartbreak, shut down, not good enough, all of that kind of. So when we start to breathe into these places, you can feel the physical and emotional restriction. So once we get a hold of these things, and I work them in different elements. So the one in Bali we're working on, which will be November, will be water. And there's a reason for that, because we're doing it over the new moon of Scorpio in Bali, because they do all the water blessings and releasings in Bali. It's a culture that works with water. So I would start with people 6 weeks or so before that to start to awaken all the restrictions in you, to look at them. Now, those restrictions will be the very thing that not good enough will be literally why you can't get to your next level in business. It'll be the piece which I work very much along those spiritual and business, spiritual business all the time.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've often said pricing is completely linked to self-worth. And so if somebody is perpetually, oh my, you know, can I really charge that, you know, and then should I look at all the you know, all of that energy, I'm like, okay, let's go find that piece.
Yeah.
And it's often to do with a self-worth thing. And so I replace it with, I do channeling, but I also will see the symbols that they need to replace these areas of constriction with. And it's like breathing into you a new vision of your, of the symbols that you will understand, because I just receive those.
Yeah.
But then it's like there's a replacing of the old energy that is holding you back. We don't move it. We don't try and erase it. We just leave it there, but we replace something else. So I've been working a lot with sparkling gem frequencies that, you know, when you take them into the back of your heart, or you take them into the back of your eyes, where you can only see one direction because you've been taught by your culture, by your gender, by your family, to see one way. When we replace, so I in a way put energetic sparkling gems at the back of your eyes, and all of a sudden you behave differently. You have a different way of being. And that's the awakening of the soul gold, because it really, soul gold to me is, it's what you're really here to do. It's your calling. And when you really believe in it and are given permission by, often you need permission by somebody to say, you can be as wild and as out there. You can say, you know, like in the same sentence, I say, I'm a branding expert and I'm really good at it. And I'm a high priestess. Yeah. And the two are completely linked. Yeah. And when I speak to people, you know, who I'm giving permission to this stuff, they're like, oh my God, I can't say that. And I'm like, yeah, you can.
Yes.
Yeah, you can. And actually you'll stand out. You'll lose the audience that you don't need. Yep. But you'll get the audience that you do need. And the frequency and the speed of success is unbelievable when that starts to happen. Yeah. So permission, women giving permission to other women, giving permission to other women. Yes. It's a beautiful process.
Yes. Do you know, I was at Tony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within, his virtual event a little while back, and day 4 is his health and well-being day. And being a foodie, I was just, you know, like on tenterhooks. He's tapped into the most amazing brains across the planet. You know, what is he going to give us? What's the gems? And his first 2 things, and I love how the universe taps you on the shoulder with the things that you need to hear, because they just keep getting repeated. The first 2 things he said was oxygen, so that breath work, and water, which is exactly what you've just said. Yeah. We, you know, we look for the complicated. It's, you know, in order to fix things, we're so, you know, I know that I'm just always looking for what's that really complicated thing. It's got to be difficult, but it's not.
Oh, sorry, a cat's trying to get up right now. Come on.
That's all right.
They're all swirling around.
I love that you've got a black cat wandering in and out.
Yeah. I've got 2 lucky black cats. I think one may join us any minute, but
yeah. So that's fine. The more the merrier. So we are running short on time. There's a couple of things. There's one thing that I just would love to highlight that you talk about, and that is that happiness is a choice. We've touched on on fear and how we can get really caught up in this sort of downward spiral of emotions. But if his happiness is a choice, could you just talk to us about that for a minute?
Yeah, I can give you two sides of the mantra in a way. So happiness is a choice. I didn't know that when I went to India, and I was I think I was about 26 or 28. I can't remember, but I was in that angsty London, wear black, everything's cool, you got to be cynical state of being. And I'd had a tough teenagehood, so I was really, you know, the ultimate, not punk, but, you know, sort of a bit grimy attitude, listen to loads of gigs kind of person. And I arrived in India I had a very definite connection immediately when I got off the plane. I thought, oh my God, I'm home. And that feels to me like past life stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, end up in Rajasthan and the desert, and they had a sacred mountain. One morning I went up this on my own, and I knew something was going to happen. It was to a shrine to Brahman. It's the only one that's in India, a shrine to Brahma. And I had a feeling that it was a very special place. So I sat and meditated on it. And all of a sudden, like a download, I got this piece, which was happiness is a choice.
Yeah.
And it was like it alchemically changed me. Mm-hmm. And the second piece came down, which was, and you will never be happy doing 9 to 5. Yeah. And I was working fully in this 9 to 5 film production at that time. Yeah. And I so got it, that means even when you've got cancer, even when you're homeless, even when happiness is a choice, like that. And the other piece that's come up much, much later when I've worked with people, there was one period of time when I was in a really, really, really bad state. And it was much later, it was in my 40s. And I basically hadn't had children, really wanted to have children. And it was this endless, like loop I was on. I would cry when I saw pregnant women. I was, like that. And there was a time when, anybody will have their piece that they have to deal with, but I just couldn't get over it. I was just in this state of, so it wasn't easy to do, happiness is a choice at that time. Yeah. So I got this other piece at that time, which was, and I'm not going to do this to myself anymore. I'm not going to do this to myself anymore, like a mantra. And there was this moment when I had done 15 years of mourning around the children thing. And I needed something like that to pull me out of it. And that was the statement. And I give it to people like it's a mantra, because when you say it, within it, it's got this, I'm not going to do this to myself anymore, and then happiness is a choice. And that piece, I can still talk about the time of, the sadness and the disappointment for me personally about not having children, but there's no impact. I healed myself of that. And now I'm just so happy and so okay with not having children. But, whatever your thing is, just try that on like it's this pulse of a mantra. I'm not going to do this. It's like a sacred pact to myself anymore.
Yeah. I use 100% responsible, which was something I learned in a leadership training that I did that was just my absolute light bulb, life-changing. I am 100% responsible for my life, my happiness. Yeah. And I think that is really what it is to be empowered. We talk about empowered, and it's a word that we throw around quite easily, but looking at what it truly means, to me, it is that 100% responsibility for my health and happiness.
Totally.
Yeah. So I know you have a beautiful gift for our audience. Could you take a minute to tell us what that is?
Sure. It's a vision quest to singing bowls, or singing chalice, actually. So it's based on shedding skin and moving into your next powerful era. It was shot all around the solstice of this year, so it's very energetically attuned to a high point of sun, and it was also a new moon. So it was a really potent, emerging divine feminine moon with full sun, solar. So she's like going to be listened to, and it's for anybody. It can be for men or women, it doesn't matter, but it's just follow the journey. You can do some journaling before. It will take just about 50 minutes. Yeah. And it's a meditation, really, but it's a way for you to step into a new powerful era on any level.
Beautiful. So I would love to ask you, as this is all about unleashing the audacious woman within, I know that you have done so many things on your journey, but if you could just pull out, what is the most bold and daring thing that you've done in your life?
Oh my God. Woo, what a question. The most bold and daring. I think I live by bold and daring right now. And I would say that one thing that happened recently, which was really, it's a cool way, it's business, but it sure is about me. So people don't know how to put me in a box because I'm unboxable.
Yeah.
And I started working with Roger Hamilton's group. Now, Roger James Hamilton is a really, like, I respect him. I respect his work. And they kind of recruited me into their group after I did a training with him called Crisis Leadership Academy. And they watched me a little bit. They saw my promotion plan, and then they asked me, could I be in their team? And I thought, my God, I haven't worked for anyone for like 500 years since I said, I'm never going to do 9 to 5 again. And I had this little, I wasn't the typical, yay, let's go moment. Instead, I was calculating, like, well, what does that look like working for them? Are they all workaholics? You know, all of this kind of stuff. But I really did want to work with them because they're amazing. And so the conversation was, well, we need to, you know, put you in a category type thing for everybody else to know what you do. And I said, well, it's going to be marketing and branding, but I would say branding. And the top most fierce woman practically I've ever met in my life said, well, how many followers do you have? And I was like 400, you know, in Instagram. Yeah. And she went, well, this is not, you know, this doesn't work, doesn't compute, this is not, and all of that. And I said, well, no, but, you know, what I know is I walk this path of authenticity. And I know that the people who work with me would stand up and say I'm like a brilliant brander. So I said, but it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. You don't need to classify me. And guess what? Now they've worked with me because I just was willing to say what I know is true, right? And they are now, I'm going to do a micro school for them, and guess what it will be in? Marketing and branding. I'm not traditional, but I speak up for exactly where I think I could be placed, and that to me was audacious. Yeah. I mean, really, it was. I could have crumbled in the face of, because they're so, it's like another Tony Robbins, you know.
Yeah. And I think
asking you to prove your worth. Well, how many followers do you have? Like, not many.
I think probably the greatest act of bravery is being truly authentic in those moments.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I've had a lot of personal ones, but that was a good recent one.
Yeah, love it. Thank you so much. I've just loved this interview, and I'm so grateful for your time, Sally. Thank you.
Pleasure. Really nice to be here.
Bye for now. Hello, beautiful one. I loved that interview, and Sally was introduced to me by one of my dearest friends on the planet, and I've heard her being spoken of many times and the incredible work that she does. And I hope that from our interview you were able to garner some of that beautiful wisdom. I also just wanted to acknowledge the fact that we have, you know, the light going from dark to, you know, crazy and back again. And it's part of the challenge of doing these online shows is I'm in Australia, Sally's in England. We are interviewing people in India and America and all across the globe. And so I just ask your forgiveness for the crazy light that comes and goes sometimes as we negotiate some crazy hours in order to do these recordings for you. So as always with these interviews, I'm really passionate about you putting into action some of the wisdom, tips and ideas that you hear. And if I can encourage you to take something away from Sally's interview, it is to remember that oxygen is the river of life. You know, it is the very thing that allows us to live. So as you are being mindful with your breath, breathing in to the point where your belly expands like a beautiful balloon, and then when you breathe out, it deflates. As you're breathing in and out, just take that mindful moment to consider that golden soul within and all the layers of messaging that you've taken on through your life that have restricted you and popped you in a box that perhaps now, through listening to these series and to this interview, you get to start peeling back some of those layers and breaking open the box so that we can unleash the audacious woman within. All right, that's it from me today. Much love and bye.